We're going to get into it. I think the first place we should start, though, is with the guy that's been buried at the end of the bench for the majority of the season. All of a sudden, Malcolm Brogdon goes down for a few games with some hamstring issues, and Payton Pritchard's thrown straight into the lineup, comes in, doesn't really, like, his rhythm's not there shooting wise, and you wouldn't expect it to be, right? Like, we saw that with him last season when he was buried behind Schroeder. That shot was kind of inconsistent. Once he started getting more minutes, that shot became more consistent. But he's a hustler, man. He's going to give you points on the board. He was getting offensive rebounds, being that guy to just sneak in. His after dribble game's fantastic. And the one thing I really like is when Pritchard's in there, you can run more inverted screens, get better mismatches for Tatum. He's just a better off-ball screener than what most of the other guards on this team are.
I was really happy with, you specifically touched upon his shooting. His 3 ball wasn't there. And that first game against the Nuggets, like, to be clear, with Malcolm Brogdon day to day, I'm assuming he's probably going to be out for at least a few more games. And they're not going to rush him back, especially if they've got Payton Pritchard to lean on. Now, before we talked about me specifically saying, like, hey, if you're not going to use Pritchard, you should trade him. And then Malcolm Brogdon, of course, goes ahead, tweaks. He's got right hamstring tightness, whatever. I mean, at the end of the day, this is kind of what you expected with it. It's the same reason why they still got Payton Pritchard around. And this kind of just proves the point. You talk about rhythm. He went out against the Denver Nuggets and the 3 ball wasn't there. He only took 1 3-point attempt, missed it, and then was 5 of 6 the rest of the night. He was being super aggressive, like you said, crashing those offensive boards. There was that one crazy sequence where the Celtics got like 4 straight offensive boards, kept the possession alive, and he goes in and just steals it away from DeAndre Jordan, picks his pocket, puts it up, and it, like, the garden just erupts. And, like, this is the kind of energy that you want. This guy is hungry. He wasn't getting any minutes. He was buried behind a bunch of other guards. And this is sort of what we talked about before, with 3 really good guards ahead of him. But now, with Brogdon injured, there's a really good opportunity for Pritchard to go in there and prove his worth. And I think maybe after a few more games, if he can keep up some solid play, Joe Mazzulla is going to have to figure out how he's going to stagger his minutes in there, because I don't think there's a way that you can really go back on that now. I think you need to find a way to get Pritchard minutes. It'll help Brogdon's workload. It'll keep him more fresh. And it's another body that's going to help you stagger some of these minutes, keep guys as fresh as possible.
I'm just not sure how you make that work, though, right? Like, if you look at the way this rotation set up, Brogdon is that backup guard. And then if you start reducing Brogdon's minutes to put Pritchard in there, did you mess with Brogdon's rhythm? Like, Brogdon's in a rhythm because he's playing starters level minutes off the bench. He's doing that Westbrook role that we've seen Westbrook start to thrive in as well. If you take away some of those minutes, do you still get the same level of Brogdon? Like, does he play with that same confidence, that same swagger? Or does he start thinking, like, man, have I done something wrong? Like, these things are all, like, they're very fluid and they're not mutually exclusive, right? Like, a large minute count doesn't necessarily mean you're going to put up good numbers or give good performances. But if you start reducing those minutes, it can have an even bigger negative effect than it can positive. So it's just finding out the right balance. I agree. I think Pritchard definitely needs minutes, especially with somebody like him that's a rhythm shooter, or somebody that can give you the additional ball handling, can push the pace, will fight on the boards. Downside is you are going to get attacked defensively, and the Celtics at the moment are still figuring out that defensive kind of identity. And you're rolling with Sam Hauser. And I know he's not a guard, but he's who second units are really targeting at the moment. Do you want 2 guys on the team, on the rotation, that can be targeted? When Hauser and Pritchard are on the floor together, that's a lot of pick and rolls to force switches onto a guy. And then, you've only got 3 switchable defenders there that can really give you legitimate defensive minutes. I'm not saying Hauser's a bad defender. He's shown he's quite viable. He could stay in front of his man. He can contest shots. But teams are hunting him. And now if you put Pritchard in that rotation too, there's 2 guys for teams to hunt, and it just becomes a little bit more difficult to get that kind of rhythm defensively and continue finding that identity that helped them become the team they were last season.
Yeah, and I guess that's the big issue, right? Pritchard being undersized, at least with Hauser. We've touched upon it before, but Hauser's got good size, and it looks like he's improved overall with how he's trying to play defense, staying in front of his man, playing with energy. He's never going to be like a fantastic defender, but you never really needed him to be. You just needed him to be passable. And the big thing that he's supposed to be doing out there is providing offense, and so far, so good. I think the issue with Pritchard now is you need Pritchard to start hitting threes. And like, again, it goes back into that conversation about rhythm. Like, how do you get this guy who's supposed to be one of your like bucket getters off the bench into a rhythm if he doesn't have a consistent role? So again, it goes back to Joe Mazzulla trying to figure out these rotations, figure out how he's going to try and balance these guys out. And it's trying to find that defense at the same time. I think this team will be really, really good defensively once they get Rob back, because it's just another body out there. It's a guy who's going to be able to be used as a roamer. And I think it allows Al Horford to kind of change the way he needs to play defense too. But I'm still wondering if they're actually going to get back to that same level defensively. Because I think offensively right now, they're fantastic. And their bench depth has done wonders with that. There's so much ball movement. Everyone out there is capable of shooting threes. Even Luke Cornett, even though he's not getting a volume there, like he's still capable. Like you have to okay, he might shoot this. Like you have to think about that at least. And I mean, I think that's played into the way that this team has just operated offensively. So much ball movement, so much willing passing. And I just don't know what's going to change with the defense, because I feel like now this team is sort of trending in a direction where I think the identity is going to change. And a lot of that's based on how a lot of these role players and, key rotation guys have changed over this past offseason.
I mean, I've said this on many shows before. It's all about balance, right? There's no point being one of the best offensive teams in the league if your defense is bad. There's no point being one of the best defensive teams in the league if your offense is bad. Finding that balance, you don't need to be a number one defense, number one offense to be an elite team. A top 10 defense with a top 3 offense, you're elite. Top 3 defense with a top 7 offense, you're elite. Boston are slowly trending towards that top 10 in defense. They were down in 20th about a week ago. I think they moved up to around about, I haven't looked, I'm assuming they'll be around about that 14th mark now, but you can, again, like I say, I haven't actually looked at the numbers today. But what I'm saying is they're trending in the right way defensively. Now, no, they're probably not going to be the same team they were last season. It's a different coach. They're prioritizing offense. They're the best offensive team in the NBA. They're one of the best three-point shooting teams in the NBA. They're chucking it at volume and converting at volume. Teams are just really struggling to figure out who to guard, when to guard them, and how to deal with pick and roll switches, etc. If you can get a top 10 defense, top 12 defense, you're going to be really tough to beat, because not only do you need to be able to score yourself, but you've got to figure out how to stop this juggernaut that's coming at you, and that's not going to be easy. So I'm not too worried about them being the 2021-22 Celtics on defense, because that was the Ime Udoka version of the Celtics. This is the Joe Mazzulla version, and this is, hey, we're going to run and gun. We've got some of the best offensive players in the NBA, and we're going to liberate them and let them play as free as possible on offense. Sometimes we might get silly plays like an off the bat board alley-oop that just goes wrong, but for the majority of the time, you're going to get some good possessions in there. So I'm not concerned about the defense. If you can get into that top 12, top 10 area, they're going to be fine.